Welcome, everyone. My name is Joel Goldberg, and we have a phenomenal discussion coming up. Thanks to all who have tuned in, and thanks for joining. We've got an amazing panel here. Many of us downtown at WeWork at the Lightwell building, and a couple of others remote in this virtual world that we're living in. Again, my name is Joel Goldberg, Royals broadcaster, host of the podcast Rounding the Bases, and many of the people here on this panel have been guests on that show before. So let's introduce our guests before we get into a very important discussion here today, as we're joined by David Voorhees, Caressa Hutchinson, Dr. Allison Edwards, and Andrew Dowis. David, you're the ringleader here that brought all this thing together. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what we're doing here today.
Thanks, Joel. My name is David Voorhees. I run True Captive Insurance, medical stop loss captive that's based in Overland Park, Kansas. And one of the big things that we've been talking about and with this group of panelists is really rebuilding trust in healthcare. That was the foundation of our company. My grandfather is a general practitioner. I went on house calls with him. So healthcare has always been personal. At that time, insurance wasn't complicated. So this discussion is very important to me. And the panelists, I think you'll see why they're here to talk about the things that they do in delivery of care and care for their employees.
So David has that perspective. Caressa, your perspective is interesting because you have all your years of nursing background and then started a company, CEO, founder of Modern Health. And so you have, I think everybody here has a little bit of a different perspective. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name's Caressa Hutchinson. I am a nurse by background and founded Modern Health. Really, I just saw a huge disconnect in the healthcare system. I felt like I wanted to go home with every single patient that I had. You know, we're giving them these great care plans and then saying, here, good luck. Go figure it out. So my heart and soul and everything is in Modern Health, and how can we help walk people through the health system?
I see Allison nodding along like, yes, you're telling my story. And I know that's true because I've heard Allison's story before. Allison, by the way, is the physician and the owner of Kansas City Direct Primary Care. And your story is one that I think really in many ways opened my eyes to all of this, and even got the way that I changed going about my healthcare when I started learning about direct primary care. And I know that you've talked a lot about I don't know if it'll be a wake up call, but a moment where you were like, similar to what Caressa was saying, wait a minute, this isn't what I signed up to do. So tell us about who you are and kind of that major change in your life a bunch of years back.
Right. Thanks, Joel. So just like Caressa was saying, I was working in a fairly traditional healthcare setting where every day when I would take my patients home, just like Caressa said, I would say, what am I doing? I'm spending, a very short amount of time, 10 to 12 minutes with each patient, throwing something at them saying, good luck, see you in 3 months. And that's not how people live their lives. And not only that, but that's not how I think healthcare could be really effective in helping people. So my big wake up call was I actually worked for a federally qualified health center serving people who are lower income on Medicaid, refugees coming in through the area. And it broke my heart every day that was my plan, was to toss something at them, have them follow up in 3 months. And we never got to the bottom of what was going on with them. And so because my heart is in medicine to serve and to help people and to really make the biggest difference in their lives, I was like, I can no longer work in the system. And that's where direct primary care came from. So like you mentioned, I own and I'm a physician with Kansas City Direct Primary Care, where we changed the economic model so that we charge a flat monthly fee. And for that, people can come in as often as they need to, or email, or have at this time, video visits, things like that. And the goal is that we establish that continuity of care and that direct relationship so that people can have a dynamic conversation with their healthcare provider. And we do keep insurance out of the equation because honestly, for primary care, at least, we can provide a pretty high quality product without having to get an insurance company involved.
Last up is Andrew Dallas, the CEO of Pro Athlete. And I guess if there are two people on this call that are not in the either medical or insurance field, it's Andrew and I. However, both Andrew and I, and I think everybody on this call, are firm believers in strong culture, in taking care of people, which is everything that Allison was just talking about, what Caressa was just talking about. In Andrew's case, it's taking care of his employees and customers. And I'm obviously speaking to groups about culture and leadership and topics like that. But Andrew, I want your tell us a little bit more about what you do, but to your perspective on this as the CEO of a company that is known for taking care of its employees.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Yeah, I'm Andrew Dallas, CEO of Pro Athlete. And like Joel said, I don't know why I'm here today. But no, just kidding. Well, I'll tell you a little bit more about why Joel and I are here. But Joel kind of hit it. We just try to take care of our employees in every way. And one of the ways that we can have the biggest impact is through healthcare. And we've just always kind of put it at the forefront of our mission in our business to take care of them in terms of their health insurance. We've always paid 100% of the premiums for them. And we find it to be challenging to keep up with the ever-changing world. And that's where we lean on people like those that are on this call today to kind of keep us, up to speed on what's going on. But at the end of the day, we're trying to do what's best for the employees first and foremost. And that's, I think, why we're on this call to talk about our approach at Pro Athlete to that.
All right, so let's delve into this a little bit. And David, I want to start with you because I think someone, it might have been you, mentioned the trust word. And by the way, that is a word that applies in every profession. I talk all the time about how the best interviews I get on TV with athletes are because of the trust that I've built with them over the years. I don't know how many people have trust in the healthcare system and the world of insurance. I know personally for me, well, I just turn to my wife and say, what's going on here? And then she sits on the phone for hours and tries to figure answers out. So David, let's talk about that. I mean, that's pretty typical for most Americans. What are we up against here?
Trust is an easy word to say. It's really hard to build it, especially when we've spent years fracturing the trust in healthcare. My background and foundation was my family being in medicine, deeply rooted. When you get to see a physician take care of a patient and care about all of them holistically, and that's not just their health, but their family's health, that sets a foundation of that trust and knowing that they're not afraid to tell them about some of the things that are going on. They're not afraid that something's not going to be covered if they share some ailment or some issue. It's really just being transparent and open and genuine about that. And at the end of the day, that's what you want in healthcare. You want to be able to rely on your doctor to be able to spend time with you and make you feel like you're a priority. And when I think about innovation in care and the delivery of care, I look at Caressa and Dr. Allison and some of the things that they're doing and trying to be innovative in that. Insurance, and I'll poke a little bit at me, being part of insurance and being a risk taker in insurance, there hasn't been a tremendous amount of innovation in that. And we're starting to see that, and I applaud everyone who's working on that. And I don't mean that to take shots at some of the big insurance carriers. It's really easy to poke at them because there's a lot that they had to do with where we've gotten, but they also provide a very valuable service. And I think very much like we've assembled this crew here today, is that the solution is not just one innovator. It's multiple innovators trying to position themselves to support the greater good. And the one thing that is most important at the bottom of the delivery of healthcare, and it's hyper-focus on the patient. It's hyper-focus on the customer or hyper-focus on the employee. And if you start there, all the other stuff takes care of itself. If you look at a spreadsheet, people look at profit and loss. That's important. But remember, what drives profit and loss? The people that put the numbers on the piece of paper. So rebuilding that trust and getting people to be open and transparent and know that there's great people out there that care very passionately about fixing this is how we're going to get there. It's with trust.
Is there room, David, to be able to make this all work and keep those big insurance companies happy? Because they have been in that powerful spot for generations and things are good for them. And there's always going to be pushback when you're trying to make change, especially for those that are already doing very well with it. So how do you make that work?
I spent 17 years in HR, And so I really feel at the foundation, the HR is the bridger between all the different departments. And every department has a different idea of the direction of a company. And the same can be said about healthcare. So when you say, can they stay happy? I think the happiness will change. The way that that looks will change. And I know there are people inside of those companies that think, listen, we don't want to be a blockbuster. If we still focus on the fully insured product, and this is the way it's always going to be, you've got the 3-tier menu, I think ultimately they'll be unhappy because the innovators will overtake them. But there are people saying, you know what? The way we've always done it is not the way forward. Is it the way that we've been here? Has it done some good things? Sure. But I think the innovators inside those companies will ultimately prevail. If not, I think they will go down a path that ultimately will create a lot of unhappiness in those companies because they are the top. They're profit leaders. They're accountable to their shareholders. And in reality, their shareholders are also the patients in the system. So we really need to think about that. I just think happiness will look different. And if they think about change and innovation and supplying such an important service and good to the citizens, then that takes shape. But it's ultimately their decision. And I've talked to a lot of them, and I think that they're there. It just takes a lot to move the Titanic. And that's why the groups here are going to force that innovation.
All right, let's continue that discussion then with Caressa. What are you seeing and how do you see this changing? It doesn't happen overnight. And this didn't just start yesterday and it won't end tomorrow. It is a long progression. And I like the Blockbuster reference on that one too, because what's Blockbuster, right? That doesn't exist anymore. I mean, that's a specific company, but the world and the way we do videos has changed. Not quite as important as healthcare and insurance and taking care of people. But what are you seeing, Caressa?
Yeah, well, it's going to take a lot of people working together. It's top-down approaches like David's talking about with how we actually pay for healthcare. But then it's people like Allison and myself that are very passionate about starting from the patient and rebuilding things from the bottom up. You know, how do we help those people one by one start to build trust again in a healthcare system? You know, you're not going to move their health if they don't trust in the system.
Mm-hmm.
Allison, how about for you? And you have, I think, like Caressa, such a connectivity with your patients, and at a level that you couldn't have had when you were in Colorado. You talked about that a little bit before. So
Right.
what do you hear from them, and what do you think of the current landscape? Are we evolving? Are we moving in a positive direction?
I could go in a lot of different directions and talk for a really long time. So Joel, you're going to have to use your professional judgment to cut me off here.
I would never cut you off. I just
But I always tell people that ultimately when you study in science, when you study something in business, when you study something, you want to get down to sort of that unit, the core unit of what's going on. You know, the core unit of what is the widget you're selling, what is it that's happening. I don't know where my hands are. But the point is in healthcare, I believe that the core unit is the relationship between the healthcare provider and the patient that they're serving. Like whether it's a physician working up and diagnosing a patient and creating a treatment plan, or it's Caressa and her team following up with the patient to implement that care team and make sure that they're successful. It is ultimately about a human helping a human. Right? It's not a Fitbit telling you how many steps you walk. It's not remote patient monitoring with all the tech gizmos and gadgets that can scale to 1 billion people and make loads of money. Like, no, that's not going to make meaningful change. And so my bias in the way that I think about this is that ultimately when somebody seeks medical care, they're often in a place of being frightened, perhaps concerned about their health, or perhaps they're healthy and are still concerned that they want to be healthy in another 10 to 20 years. And for that, having a direct relationship with a person you can trust as a professional who can help you. And sometimes even, you know, like I do with my patients, say, I don't know, like, and, you know, that weird serum that you bought from that wellness shop is definitely not going to help you, but good luck with that, you know? And just to have that dynamic. And so I will say that as far as judging its efficacy, I have been working in rural settings for the last 6 weeks, and have entrusted my patients to the care of one of my partners. And my partner texted me the other day and was like, "Your patients really like you." And I was like, "I am sorry. I'm so sorry." Because it makes it, because that's why we have these relationships, is so that you don't have to explain yourself, and you don't have to. You just have that trust is really what it comes down to. So.
Yeah, I would just add that every single patient, like Allison is talking about, has their own story of why they don't trust healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And until somebody can sit down with them and really listen and find out what that barrier is to trust, you're not going to move the needle.
Right.
Well said. Just to let everybody know too, for anyone that is tuning in, and we appreciate everybody joining us today. If you're watching on YouTube, you can submit any comments or questions, and we will see those and be able to answer those. Let me go to Andrew, because again, we're talking about people here, about taking care of people. That's been the common theme, should always be the common theme too. And Andrew, I'm curious your perspective as the CEO of a company and someone that has to navigate all of these potential pitfalls and issues on behalf of your employees, how you see the current landscape.
Yeah, well, and I've had the privilege of seeing Allison kind of map out the system and how it works and where the flaws are, and it's eye-opening to see medical professionals explain it, because to me that's really what matters. They're the ones that get to see it kind of play out every day, and so I've learned a lot from her. But how it translates over to our business and others, a good example I can give. We do a lot of things here to be healthy. We have a weight room, cardio, swimming pool, a basketball court, a personal trainer, a chef that cooks for us. We have all these things to follow along with the core value of create a healthy work environment. We were even voted the 3rd healthiest company in America in 2016. And the next year, our insurance rates went up. We do everything. That's what's wrong. I don't understand why they went up. And that we do all these things, and it's just like, yeah, here's what happens. Your rates are going up, and you don't really get the explanation as to why. So learning different ways and the innovation that, like David talked about, is key to our business to continue going, because at this rate, if we keep getting increases and we think we're doing everything right, we're not going to be able to offer free health insurance for all of our employees. And that's not right in our eyes, because we want to continue to do that, because especially during a pandemic, we've got to protect those people that are doing the things that are so important for our business and taking care of our customers. And it's just kind of an interesting thing when you look at a company like ours that tries to be really healthy, and you don't really fully understand why the end result is hikes. And I'm sure, maybe more people went and had visits and surgeries, different things like that. But the system is set up very much so, we believe, to confuse you. And they use big words. Like, everybody on this panel would understand the terminology. People like me, we're not smart enough to understand that. Deductible here, out of pocket there. People don't get that like everybody thinks they do. I'm serious. Like, an entry level recent grad that just got out of college and it's moved out of their parents' house or whatever, they don't know what that means. And trying to educate those people, it's just very messed up on our front, because people don't understand what's going on.
And even when you know what that means, sometimes the needle moves, and it's really hard to hit a moving target. And like with Dr. Allison, it was interesting. So our first conversation, it was very apparent to me that we had some different philosophies. And I'm going to use the D word. We even went as far as having a disagreement. And I loved that, because there is no one direction to fix this. We have to argue. We have to disagree. But if your commitment is the end game of a better system, that people aren't confused, that people aren't frustrated, then that disagreement is good. That discord is good. And I think Andrew, as you talked about these different plans and these different terminologies, one of the things that I challenge innovation in terms of insurance is don't give a menu of things for the same companies to pick from the same menu. There are no two companies that are the same, period. I don't care. There's some similarities, but no two companies are the same. So why don't we individualize coverages for those companies? Yes, sure, it takes a lot to keep track of it, but it's really not that hard. And I dare I say it, it's kind of our duty. So that's one of the things that I challenge insurance, and I'm challenging myself. I'm keep pointing at myself because I'm part of that system. Is let's be individualized, let's be unique, let's build a program that your employees can not only believe that you built something for them, but you can be proud. You're like, wow, I'm covered. It doesn't matter. I can go see this doctor. I have this issue, but I know I'm covered and I'm not confused with some crazy terminology. Sorry, soapbox there for a second.
Oh, it's good.
Allison?
I was going to say at the very beginning of this, David, when you said your introduction and stuff, I think you even made a mention of like, the 3 tiers and da-da-da. I'm like, oh, you've lost all our entire audience. Like what that just whoop, went over everybody's head. And to the point that, to just echo, Andrew, what you were saying, and David, is that you try and explain this to people and they get cross-eyed.
Yeah, and it's not just new grads, it's educated people.
Yes.
In pediatrics, you'd have parents that were lawyers and, or very educated professionals, and then you throw a bunch of medical terms at them and they're lost. They're educated, but they're not educated in healthcare. You need somebody that understands the healthcare system.
And I don't think it's intentional. I really don't think it was designed to use that. But what I do know is I get to, again, like in HR, I was a bridger. Now in this role, I'm bridging between insurance companies, the providers, the companies. And I find that each person gets really comfortable in what they do, and they're good at what they do. But then to think about learning something that you don't know how to do is scary. And then you're afraid you're going to look like you don't know what you're doing. If you think about the broker community, because they're a big part of this, they support Andrew and his company. They sell our products, and they've been learning this as they go, but they've been so embedded in fully insured products. They know that backwards and forwards. They know it better than I do. And so if you introduce something new that they've spent 20, 30 years learning, they provide for their family, they feel like they're offering a service, and then you throw something new in, it's scary. Now, I will challenge them to say, just because it's scary doesn't mean it's a good reason to not do it. I challenge everybody, and maybe that's a character flaw. So hopefully no one feels like I'm throwing, shade at them, but just because it's different, just because it's scary doesn't mean we can't learn together and just be transparent and honest and say, this is something I've got to work with someone else to teach me how to do it. Like direct primary care seemed foreign years ago, but now there are people out there that can help you with that. With Caressa doing virtual primary care in her company, that wasn't there 10 years ago, and it seems different. How do I get high touch, high frequency care? It's there. Partner with people that know. Not only does that make you look better because you went to a subject matter expert, but then you educate yourself, and the next time you have that conversation, guess what?
And I want to add to what David just said, the sort of too long didn't read of what he just said is get a broker who's willing to think outside the box. And that is, if you talk to your broker and they're like, I don't know, here's the 3 plans from United that you chose from last year. Do you want to re-up on them? And this is where David and I sometimes have a little bit of a disagreement, but that broker gets paid a % of that policy or a certain amount on that policy. And so, and they get paid the same amount, whether or not they provide multiple options and do a lot of research and work and actually have to think like David was describing and kind of make themselves feel uncomfortable. If they just present the same thing they did last year and you choose it, they still get paid well. And so the financial incentive is not there for your broker to really go to bat for you and to think outside the box. And not to say that brokers are not good people or that they're not thinking outside the box. That is not what I'm trying to say here. What I'm saying is find one that is, because they're out there, they exist, they're really good brokers. And there's some that are just trying to pass the paycheck and get you to sign again so that they can go out and not make themselves feel uncomfortable, which is understandable. But that's, I think, the biggest thing that I see from my perspective, that makes a huge difference in a company.
Well, Andrew, I'll correct one thing. When you said everybody else on this call knows what all these words mean, but you forgot to lump me into that group. But, I think as a consumer, and we all are, as a consumer and as someone that is an independent contractor in terms of baseball in my business, so I've got to go out there and find whatever I can find. One of the challenges was it would change year to year. So oftentimes what you thought you had one year was totally different the next year. And I don't know that it was someone trying to pull the wool over. I think it was flaws in the system. Plans changed. and who is going to explain it to you in a way that gets beyond those big words? Who is going to explain all the fine print? I mean, how many of us study every single word of a contract when we sign it, or do we have a lawyer do it for us? So who is going to be that person, David, that actually takes care of you? And I think that's, Andrew takes care of his employees. Allison takes care of her patients. Caressa takes care of her patients or clients. We all want to be taken care of and know that we have someone that's going to advocate for us. And it seems to me that that's what's often missing.
Yeah.
David?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, again, I mean, I've been accused of seeing the best in too many people. I think inherently people are good. And usually the motivator is fear for them to drive a different direction. And so I like sitting kneecap to kneecap with people. I know right now you can't sit kneecap to kneecap with people, so it's difficult for me. But really just sitting down and talking to people and educating them. And I learned so much. I mean, there's so many things that I learned from groups that I talked to about things that I didn't even know, or products out there that I didn't even know. And, it's really easy to say the system is broken. It's really easy to say the system is flawed. And yes, at baseline, those claims could be made and probably substantiated. I think the next step then is, okay, we know that. Now, what do we go do? Because we could all sit in here and just bang against everything that is wrong. That's the easiest thing to do. But now it's incumbent upon us to go make some changes, to partner with some great people. We talk about brokers out there. I mean, they're on the forefront of this, and there's some really great ones out there. And there's some ones that are out there that just haven't had time to become great. They haven't met people that will educate them. So, okay, let's move forward and think about how can we be innovators? How can we be drivers? I steer away from the term disruptor, because sometimes I feel like a disruptor can be a distraction, and that's just me. That's wordplay. So being a disruptor is not a bad thing, but I want to get on the next level of, okay, what are the next steps we can take? How can we make Andrew's company feel more confident that the steps they're taking to be healthy will be rewarded by favorable results when they get their next insurance? How can we incentivize people to go see Dr. Allison and call in to Caressa's nurses to feel like they can be transparent, open, have a fantastic relationship? Like, those are the next steps. Like I mentioned, it's hyper focused on the front end. Those are the patients, the customers, the employees.
Andrew, your thoughts?
Yeah, I echoing a couple of things that people said. The broker, I do agree with. Like we've had some good ones and we've had some not so good ones, and it takes about 5 minutes to come into our building and know that we think outside the box. And if I can't make them understand that anymore, than showing them how we do things and telling them how we've taken care of our employees. But the difference in getting those or thinking outside the box is having a good broker. And I think we're in a really good spot now with one. And, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but we've looked at all the options: level funded, self-funded, captives, all these different things. Again, I'm going to confuse people listening. I still don't even know what they all mean, so I don't even know why I'm saying it. But one thing I really love about kind of where we're headed is the direct primary care movement. It fits so well with what Pro Athlete thinks in terms of how to treat your employees. They do the same thing with how they take care of their patients. And I'm really excited to see where it goes in the next couple of years. We're involved in that right now. As of January 1st, our employees have access. And we're looking forward to see what the results can be. But, I wanted to just piggyback on the broker leading us through it, because we wouldn't have known what those options were had we not got a good broker.
Again, a reminder to everybody that if you are watching us on YouTube, feel free to submit a question for our panel, David, Caressa, Allison, and Andrew, for any and all of them. And we can certainly delve into whatever topics or questions that you have. Ben Walnick submitted one. He said, I have a young group of employees, mostly single and healthy. They don't actively think of healthcare and planning. How, as a leader, can I best set them up for success with their healthcare future? That's a great question, because, I mean, really, how many 22-year-old, 25-year-olds are thinking about their healthcare? I certainly wasn't at the time. Worked for a TV station. I got healthcare. Tell me where I'm supposed to go. And I certainly wasn't advocating for myself. And so let's talk about that. Lost Allison for a sec. We'll get her back. when you're, you know, when you're living the good life in a remote cabin in Colorado, these things are going to happen from time to time. But who wants to take a stab at Ben's question in terms of setting up his employees for the future?
I'll start. And I think when you have a smaller organization, you have to start thinking, and you have to longhand it. What are the benefits of creating a very custom product that's beneficial to you? You know, Dr. Allison mentioned that they have a set fee and it's primary care, so the claims would be similar. So they have taken insurance out. Is that the most frequency that the employees have? Is that going to take care of the majority of the things that they would do? So that's a first phase. Then if you want to think about catastrophic coverage, you know, there are things beyond the primary care physician that they won't be able to serve. So what do you bundle with that? What can you build to create that there? Because it is one of the toughest things in America in terms of group healthcare is that small group. And we're actively working on solutions for that. How do you cater to a company of 5 to say 30? There are solutions there, but not all of them are great. So you have to get creative. You know, with Caressa and her group, it's a very similar process. It's virtual primary care. And I'll be honest, when Teladoc first came out, because of my grandfather, I thought it was going to fail. I was like, how can you do what he did face to face and put this on the phone? And boy, was I wrong. You know, and then you fast forward through COVID, and now that's really how we're seeing a lot of our care delivery. And so with Caressa's group, you can build something and bundle something that is at reasonable cost, but it gives you that high touch, high frequency. And those things, in addition to having somebody at the ready, it gives you the comfort, and it also provides early detection, because that's how you also impact rates down the road. You prevent the big catastrophic claims that will eat up what the actuary figures out.
Yeah, and I think with young guys, from the patient perspective, it's the same as anybody else. It's sitting down, figuring out from a human side what incentivizes them, how they would like to receive care and interact with the healthcare system, and, you know, help them achieve those goals. It's all about human behavior at the end of the day.
Allison, welcome back. She's, you know, she's in a cabin with a windstorm. What else, you know?
Sorry. I promise I needed a vacation. So this is vacation world for me. And apparently the power only works sometimes.
No, I told you on a text message when you texted me you were in the middle of a windstorm that I was envious now, not just of the cabin, but of the windstorm, because it feels like you've had the chance to get away. Yeah, we're still pulling you into this discussion, which is good. And oh, by the way, who hasn't gotten booted off of a Zoom call or a StreamYard or whatever your platform is, weekly, daily, whatever it is? We're all used to that at this point. Another question came in from Justin Kim, who asked, how as an individual do I know that my company is taking care of me at the depth that Andrew takes care of his employees? I know close to nothing about healthcare. I think Justin's speaking for most people out there in America. If you're lucky and you have an employer like Andrew, you can at least have that trust that's been built to know that you're going to be taken care of, even if Andrew is struggling right now with getting some answers on some things. So who wants to take a stab at that? How does Justin or anyone know that he or his people are being taken care of?
Yeah, the HR guy in me wants to jump in and take this. I will say this, you know, Andrew and his company they're incredibly generous with that, and that's something that his employees should feel fantastic about. If your employer isn't providing 100% insurance, that doesn't mean you have a bad employer. Andrew mentioned that the cost of insurance is outstanding. It supersedes the rate of inflation, so it's really hard to keep up with it. And if you're thinking about a business and keeping your doors open and the amount of contributions that you make to your employers' insurance, it doesn't make you a bad employer. Sometimes you have to make really tough decisions. So I think the good mark of a health program is, one, do you feel like they listen to some of the things that you want? You know, is it fertility that you're interested in? And there's enough conversation around that maybe there's some opportunity to do that. Does it feel like you don't have enough opportunities to go see other doctors outside of the network? You know, there's some different things that you can tweak. But to me, the biggest thing is just having a voice and having a consultative conversation with your HR department or your leadership if your company's small enough. And that's where you start. And then you can start getting creative. But I wouldn't use dollars to really be the barometer of if your health plan is successful. It's challenging. And ultimately, I would tell you as a business owner, if my options are keep the business open and continue paying for employees, continuing those checks coming in, allowing their quality of life to exist, versus I have to do something strong with healthcare and not provide as much, I'm going to choose keep the doors open versus doing that. And so you just really have to think about all the different variables in it before you make a choice of, is this really supporting me or not?
And I'll add to that, because I think that when people ask that question, what they're expressing is sort of the fear of the unknown. What happens if I have an accident? What happens if I need to see the doctor? What happens if yada, yada, yada? And to give you the literal answer, you can read the plan policy, but if you do that, your head is going to explode and you're going to be you're probably going to be more scared. And that's not your employer's doing, that's the insurance company's doing. And so I think to best assess or to best get an answer to that question, number one, figure out if a doctor that you want to use, like David was saying, is in network, and that's part of the insurance policy. Figure out how much you're expected to pay, how much the insurance will pay. And then just know that no insurance plan is going to be perfect. And sorry, David, again, and to a certain extent, that's not a sign of whether or not your employer is doing a good job, but rather the industry has huge issues that it's trying to work through, like David has mentioned. And I think there's another question coming that I think segues into, Joel, with permission to kind of address that. The next one just says, how do we address the surprise costs of healthcare? We use the service and then we're billed, and it seems the only industry that operates that way. And I think that's a perfect point to raise and kind of juxtapose those two questions together. And that's why I started my business, is because I got sick and tired of financially ruining people with the orders that I was placing. And so to give a very biased answer to that question, how do we remove surprise bills? Will you stop choosing clinics and doctors that surprise bill? And so clinics like direct primary care, we don't do any surprise billing. You will know the cost of everything prior to doing it. We also don't use insurance, because the insurance company is the one that muddies the water, that does kind of create the issue of the surprise billing. I know there's some legislation moving through Congress right now, and that has kind of come through the pike, that is trying to address that, at least in the context of emergency rooms. That's a different conversation, but I agree. The point that this question raises is, why do we surprise bill in this industry and no other, is like on point, A+. That is my criticism as well.
Yeah, and that's oh, go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, sorry. I apologize, David. No, that was part of what I was saying in my first comment about, maybe some of the flaws. It's things like that. You go in, you think one thing, and then 2 months later, you get some bill. You don't even remember what it was. Like, I can't tell you how many times that's happened. I asked my wife, hey, what was this again? And that shouldn't be the way this works. You should feel safe, and you should feel like you understand something as important as your healthcare. And that's kind of what I meant early on when I talked about some of the flaws of the system. I think too often we don't think about, Casey's question and how it impacts the end user, the patient in that regard. And there's just all this red tape that it seems like it goes through. At the end of the day, we're trying to provide, healthcare for people and keep them safe. And then they get turned away because, like, the next question talks about not wanting to go for that reason. What's that all about? So we're turning people away from going and getting the healthcare they need because of the way we bill. What's wrong? I mean, that's the part that, like, as a company here, we just can't understand that. So.
And I think that there are two ways, and you're 100% correct. I make the joke of going to buy a TV at Best Buy. You just pull up and say, give me a TV. They throw one in the back of your car and they say, we'll bill you. That's kind of what healthcare sometimes feels like. And it is, again, it's easy to poke at that. I think the first step is you need to ask questions. And you don't know what questions to ask, so you need to find an advocate. There are many advocates. Brokers are starting to hire advocates inside of their shops to be a patient advocate. I know we at True Captive, we focus mainly on trying to bridge the terminology that's used and be really transparent about everything. Another player in that is when you get into self-funded programs or captive programs, you've got a TPA or third-party administrator. They do the vast majority of the heavy lifting. So you think the insurance company pays the claims, that's correct. But that third-party administrator is taking those claims in and scrubbing them and working with them. And there are great TPAs out there that also have advocates. So I think the first step, insurance isn't the catch-all. We can't do everything for everyone. But I tell you, if you call us, we'll pick up the phone and we'll talk to you about it. So I would encourage, the consumers of healthcare to start asking those questions. And if you get somebody that says, I don't know, ask them to find somebody that does. Be a consumer that expects a return for their payment for services, and find someone that'll answer that. If you're going to get an MRI and your question is, how much does this MRI cost? And they say, well, I don't know. That's not acceptable. Okay, well, let's go through this. And I know that adds extra effort. But again, it shows to healthcare that it's important to you. Therefore, it'll be important to us, because guess what? You pay our paychecks. You pay the things that allow us to provide quality of life for our families. And when you make it important enough to us, that behavior will change. Not to say that there aren't a ton of people out there excited to have that conversation. I'm that person. I'm that nerd. But trust me, there's tons of me out there that will do that. And they're on the podcast.
Yeah, that's
Hey, David.
what we spend half of our time doing. We work between the employer and the employee and the healthcare system as liaison, essentially. So not only offering the healthcare, but literally spending the rest of our time figuring out exactly what your options are, what your benefits pay for, what other, things are out there, such as direct primary care. But you're right, you're just asking people to follow a moving target constantly. And I would also encourage employees to tell their employers what's going on with their healthcare experience. We are often hearing these stories from the employees, and then, we'll go back and have the conversation at a high level with the employer to let them know what's going on inside the system or inside the plan they've chosen for their employees. And the employers don't know that that's going on. They think that they have chosen something that is going to take care of their employees, and they have put their trust in that. And they don't always know. So you have to, we definitely let them know, because I think most of them, like Andrew, their hearts are in the right place. They're trying to do the right thing, but they don't have all of the information.
All right, let's shift just a little bit, and we'll certainly take more questions for any that come in. And I mean, I think I agree with everything that's been said with some of these comments too, is just not knowing. Do I really need to do this? Do I not need to do it? What's it going to cost me? I mean, how many other places, and you guys talked about it, you go in Best Buy and here's what the TV costs. Maybe you get a little discount on it, maybe not. And here, I can't think of a whole lot of professions that are like that. I would say getting your car fixed sometimes can be like that. Like, okay, what's it really going to be? It's an unsettling feeling. But now we're not talking about a car, we're talking about our health. So, as we move on here and start to wrap up at a certain point, I want to talk about the future. It's one of my favorite questions to ask any of the guests on my podcast is, what does your business or whatever you do look like in 5 years, 10 years down the road? Try to envision not just your hopes and aspirations, but how the world changes. And we've seen that in the last year, just with the pandemic and the things that we're doing, even right now as we speak, we would have never envisioned doing a year ago. So let's go around the horn here a little bit, and we could start with whoever. I'll go back to David, I guess, to begin. But how do things look in this slow evolution and change that I think all of us believe is happening? What does it look like, say, in 10 years?
I think you have a lot more players in the market, but all being interconnected. I think right now you've got the big four fully insured carriers out there that dominate the marketplace. I think you'll start to see a lot more innovators involved in that, and then us all partnering together. I get questions about, will we have universal healthcare? Will government do that? And it's possible. I don't think the government is equipped to be able to manage and run healthcare because of all the different complexities and parties involved. But if they do, I think what they'll do is they'll contract to companies like ours to do that. But I do think you'll get more players in, and I think we are going to have to work together, because if we're competing against one another, that's good, that drives innovation. But then again, it also kind of brings us apart and able to point at what's wrong with your program, what's wrong with your program, what's wrong with your program. I do see also a heavy reliance on companies moving to self-funded programs and captive programs. Obviously, I'm biased, but I think if I look at self-funded programs, it gives you control. You get to see under the hood. You get to see claims in real time, so you know what you're paying for, and you're not paying them until they actually happen. And someone mentioned, how do I avoid surprise bills? One of the biggest questions I get from owners of companies is, well, gosh, if I become the insurance company, so to speak, what happens if I have that huge claim of a premature birth or a transplant or something? And those are covered in those plans. You just have to work with your insurance company or broker, whoever's working, to do that. But really what I see is people moving to more control, having more options. It adds more complexity, but wouldn't you agree that if it's more complex, yet it provides a better custom solution to your group, that it's worth bringing in 2 or 3 or 4 companies to provide a tailored approach to you? So that's what I see, almost like a Pangea of healthcare.
Caressa?
Oh gosh, I think I'd be very naive to try to say what healthcare is going to look like in 10 years. I think that there's a lot of innovation out there, like David's talking about on the payer side. I hope to see it become more free market options, for it to continue to become more consumer driven, for there continue to be changes towards a more transparent system so people can make choices that are best for them. I think from my standpoint, I even tease with my team that, who knows, maybe they're going to tell us we have to get testing on Mars for it to be paid for in 10 years. But I think anything is at play with the system that we've seen. But what we're going to do is continue to focus on the patient, continue to focus on helping them navigate the system, whether that's a hospital, a home-centered solution, or testing in Mars.
Hey, you never know where that's going. It's going there at some point, maybe.
Elon's taking us there.
Well, we'll tell you how to get there.
Does Elon have a plan figured out for all of us too? Allison, from the physician side of things, where do you see things going? You've made such inroads, and those that do what you do, to the point that was mentioned earlier in this panel, in this discussion, that it's becoming a little bit more normal. Maybe, I assume, that you're getting a few less funny looks when you explain to people exactly how it works. Whereas when it started, I'm sure nobody had heard of such a thing before. So where is this all going in 10 years?
It'll be really interesting. Like Caressa was saying, like Lord, to predict the future is to just write yourself down as wrong. But the trend that I'm seeing that was actually escalated in COVID and in the pandemic is the thought that the patient can serve as a consumer, and as a consumer who deserves to be able to weigh options and vote with their wallet, vote with their feet. And so what we're seeing, especially in the telemedicine space, is that there are a lot of telemedicine companies that are popping up that are foregoing insurance completely and offering a subscription model or a per visit model. And really, from kind of flipping to a business hat more, that's a really scalable model, because if you have one person sitting here who can see people all over the place without the cost of rent and all of that, that's a really interesting way to kind of test the waters of, does a consumer actually want to pay cash for their healthcare? And as you could see with the amount of advertisements you all probably get, or maybe I'm targeted, but with these direct to consumer like Rose and Hims and all of these, like, get your visit, get your prescription mailed to you. I think that that's probably where we're going to see the most explosive growth, almost in a chaotic way. And then probably within the next 10 years, as with every industry, it's going to come together, and you're going to find market leaders who really figure out how to make those types of offerings work and how to consolidate that, so the consumer isn't having to pick 8 different companies to work with. That's, I think, a little bit confusing as a consumer. but rather can say like, look, here's one, and they can take care of all of these things in a cash-based way that's transparent and everything like that. So that's my thought, is that we'll see more people electing to exert control by foregoing not using their insurance. And so in David's world and Andrew's world, it'll be interesting to see how the insurance companies adapt to the desire of the consumer to have more control and to be able to pay for things with cash. And will they start to design a product that sort of wraps around the cash-based services to really provide that catastrophic care? I don't know, but I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and I know I'm asking everybody to look into a crystal ball. The good news is 10 years from now, we're not going to go back and see if you got it right or not.
Thank you.
We will. I don't know. Maybe we'll have a 10-year reunion. But
don't hold me to this.
I won't blame it on the cabin. But no, we don't know. I mean, it's an interesting thing to envision, and it's certainly an interesting thing, Andrew, as the CEO of a company, to hope that this continues to get better, to hope that you could provide more options to your employees and to provide more choice. And I'm sure that that's something you think about on a regular basis.
Yeah. I hope, that companies start to listen to people like the ones on this call. These are the people out there innovating and looking at it differently. And to me, that's what I hope happens. And I truly believe it will, just because I think people are kind of fed up with how they have had to handle or deal with it over the years. I know that's where we got, we just got to the point where none of the solutions provided to us were working. So I'm hoping more and more companies listen to the podcasts like this and listen and talk to people that are on this call and learn about innovative ways that work for your business. And, I know Amazon and other, companies are trying to get into this space. I don't know what that means. Mm-hmm. David probably would know more about that than I would, but there's definitely a lot of attention on it right now. And coming off of the pandemic, I think it's top of mind for everybody, because we don't want to have to face something else like this in the future without the proper health coverage and stuff like that for your organization and your people. And so I'm sure there's a lot of businesses out there right now that feel kind of lost, but these are the people on this call that can guide you through it. So.
Well, let's hit at least one more question here. And certainly if anyone wants to throw out any more questions on YouTube while we're here, please do. Justin had a good follow-up or a second question. He asked, does the process of getting healthcare change as an employee, whether or not my employer is part of a captive program? How does my experience change, or does it even change at all? David?
Yeah, I think I can speak to this, and Andrew can speak to this, as his company participates in a captive. It doesn't. In many ways, your insurance feels exactly the same way it did, except it's customized to your population. There's more efficiency in it. There's more control. So no, you would still use the same networks that you're using before, the same doctors. So none of that changes. But it is one of those things where you now get to drive how much you spend. The company has more control over that. And thus, it being more efficient, your company hopefully can offer more to you in the form of subsidies for your insurance or those things. But it absolutely does not change anything. In fact, if it does anything, it makes it better. But you wouldn't really know the difference as an employee, because your card would still have the same carrier stamp on it, and you'd still be able to go to the same place. It's just more efficient for the company.
Andrew, anything to add on that?
No, that nailed it pretty well. One thing we really liked, being a smaller organization, we were kind of blind to claims and stuff like that before. Now we're able to kind of see that a little more clearly and educate our employees on what we need to do. Because one thing I've learned in this insurance space and healthcare, it is very much for an organization a team effort. You all have to kind of chip in and be on the same page, and not if you have a paper cut, go to the ER. You got to do certain things together, and it comes through education. And the captive has allowed us to kind of do that more easily this last year. This is our second year in it.
Okay, as we wrap things up here, first and foremost, a shout out to WeWork, and we're in their newer location. They've got two of them in Kansas City, one in the Crossroads on Walnut, and then the other one here downtown at the Lightwell building. So it's good to be very socially distanced well, I'd rather not be, but from David and Caressa, who are on opposite sides of a very big room here downtown. And we've got Allison in Colorado and Andrew in the office at Pro Athletes. So let's wrap things up with just any final thoughts, anything that's on all of your minds in terms of this discussion, anything that has stood out, anything that we haven't addressed. So we'll let everybody think about those thoughts a little bit, and I'll just keep kind of going in order. Unless anyone wants to go first, I'll throw David under the bus first, and get some final thoughts from you.
I'm happy to do that. I just circled back to really what we started talking about from the beginning. We have to rebuild trust in healthcare. That is critical. And we all have differences of opinions, and healthy discord is not bad. You know, you can be afraid and be transparent about it. It doesn't make it bad. But if we don't rebuild this trust, we're never going to get the momentum we need to make really strong progress. And I think that it's incumbent upon all of us to ask questions and not be okay with hearing it's the way we've always done it, or I don't know. Go find and seek out people who are as passionate about your health as you are. They exist out there. They're on this call. They're out there listening. They're out there working in the field. I know Dr. Allison has been volunteering at rural hospitals, which is absolutely incredible during the pandemic. So I just think we really need to focus on that word trust and accept nothing more than rebuilding it.
Caressa?
Yeah, I'll add on and agree with that. Just that it's time for people to start asking questions. It's time for people to start saying we're not going to keep accepting this way of doing healthcare. It's time for, I think, a lot of healthcare professionals are starting to stand up, like Dr. Edwards, with we're going to take care of the patient, and that's just it. And I think employers have to do that as well. You know, your broker might be your best friend, but if he's not bringing you extra options and things to take care of your people, then it's your duty to go ask for alternatives.
Allison?
I don't know if I have much more to add.
You always have something to add. Come on.
I don't know. I'm like, is the power going to go out again in the middle of my sentence? I don't know. I believe strongly that human relationships matter. Being small at that level matters, and finding people, to Caressa's point, like that actually bring you things that are solutions is an incredibly important thing to have if you're a business owner, and also if you're an individual looking for answers. So stay focused on that.
Andrew, final word.
Yeah, I guess I'll speak to the business owners and people out there. You know, this is serious. We believe you should do your best to take care of your employees because they do so much for you and your business and your customers. Don't treat the health insurance line or your healthcare efforts as just another line on the P&L. It's way bigger than that. And I think if more businesses can see it that way and try to think outside the box with the help of the people that are on this call and others, I think we'll all be in a much better spot. So,
well, we have achieved an hour of a robust discussion, and one that I think many will continue to have. And it was great to have all of you here today. So for David Voorhees, founder, CEO of True Captive Insurance, Caressa Hutchinson, founder and CEO of Modern Health, Allison Edwards, physician and owner at Kansas City Direct Primary Care, and Andrew Dallas, CEO of Pro Athlete. I'm Joel Goldberg. My podcast is Rounding the Bases, and this has been an excellent discussion. So certainly if anyone wants to reach out to anyone on this call, you can find any of us on social media. A big thanks to WeWork for having us here at the Lightwell building and for Let It Fly Media. Guys, thanks so much for doing this. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thanks.